US President Donald Trump is waging an aggressive tariff strategy against friend and foe alike.
When Donald Trump slapped a brutal 50% tariff on Brazil last month, he wasn't just targeting their exports. He was essentially weaponizing trade policy to pressure Brazil over their prosecution of Jair Bolsonaro. Think about that for a moment. The world's largest economy is now using economic warfare to interfere in another nation's judicial system. This story gets even more fascinating when you realize what's actually happening behind the scenes. And if you want to stay ahead of these major geopolitical shifts that are reshaping our world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trump's aggressive tariff strategy might be achieving the exact opposite of what he intended. Instead of bringing countries to heel, he's actually pushing them together in ways that could fundamentally reshape global trade. Let's start with the sheer scale of what we are witnessing. Since what Trump calls Liberation Day back in April, the US has imposed new export duties on nearly 90 countries. We are talking about both traditional allies and nations that barely trade with America. The EU, which previously enjoyed single-digit tariffs, now faces 15% duties after they quickly capitulated rather than fight a prolonged trade war. Brazil is hitting back hard with no deal in sight. India just got slammed with tariffs that doubled from 25% to 50% because they won't stop buying Russian oil. China continues to refuse American demands, although talks are ongoing. Russia faces the threat of even tougher secondary sanctions if they don't agree to a Ukraine ceasefire. Now here's where Trump's strategy starts to unravel. Take Brazil's situation. That 50% tariff isn't really about trade imbalances. It's Trump's way of pressuring Brazil to drop their case against Bolsonaro, who is accused of plotting a coup. Brazilian officials have made it crystal clear they won't be bullied this way. The India situation is equally revealing. Trump claims they are funding Russia's war machine by buying oil, but India has a compelling counter-argument. European countries and even the US continue substantial trade with Moscow when it suits their interests. The oil price cap system that Western nations designed actually created incentives for countries like India to buy more Russian crude, refine it, and profit from the arbitrage. What's really striking is how Trump seems oblivious to the economic reality of tariffs. These are not taxes paid by foreign countries, they are paid by American consumers and businesses when goods arrive at US ports. We are essentially looking at what could be the largest tax increase on American consumers in modern history, and it's hitting Trump's own voter base the hardest. But the real strategic blunder goes much deeper. Trump is dismantling an 80-year-old global financial architecture that has been the foundation of American economic dominance since World War II. The Bretton Woods system, the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency, the entire framework of international trade settlement, all of this is now under threat. Consider what's happening with BRICS. These countries represent 40% of global GDP, more than double the US share. They control the majority of the world's critical resources and manufacturing capacity. Previously, BRICS operated as a loose coalition, careful not to directly confront the United States. But Trump's direct targeting of Brazil and India is changing that calculation dramatically. The recent BRICS summit was telling. Member countries deliberately avoided mentioning the US directly, trying to maintain that cautious approach. But Trump's actions since then have created new incentives for deeper cooperation. Countries that were previously hesitant about BRICS financial mechanisms are now fast-tracking central bank coordination and alternative payment systems. China's response has been particularly strategic. Beijing isn't pushing for confrontation. They are simply sitting back and watching as Trump isolates America from its own allies and trading partners. Chinese officials privately describe Trump as the greatest gift China could have asked for because he is doing their work for them in undermining US global influence. The semiconductor tariff announcement perfectly illustrates this strategic confusion. Trump declared a 100% tariff on foreign-made chips, but then immediately offered exemptions for companies investing in US facilities. Taiwan's TSMC, Samsung, and SK Hynix all qualify these exemptions because of their existing American investments. So who actually gets hurt? Smaller players like the Philippines, where semiconductors represent 70% of their exports. This brings us to the secondary tariff threat, which could be Trump's biggest miscalculation yet. He is threatening 100% tariffs on any country that continues buying Russian oil after this August deadline. But look at who this would actually hit. China is Russia's largest oil customer. India has dramatically increased its Russian energy purchases. Even NATO allied Turkey is a major buyer of Russian energy. More importantly, European Union countries still trade over 60 billion euros annually with Russia, and the Russian LNG imports actually increased 9% last year. Is Trump really prepared to impose punitive tariffs on his closest allies to pressure Russia? The political and economic fallout would be enormous. The defense relationship with India shows how quickly these trade disputes can spill over into strategic partnerships. Reports suggest India has paused major weapons purchases from the US, including a $3.6 billion aircraft deal and advanced missile system. While India denies these reports as fabricated, the mere fact that such speculation exists shows how Trump's trade policy is undermining critical security relationships. What we are witnessing is a fundamental restructuring of global trade patterns. Countries are actively diversifying away from the US markets and dollar denominated transactions. BRICS nations are accelerating work on alternative payment systems. While they are not ready to launch a new reserve currency, they are building the infrastructure that could eventually challenge dollar dominance. The historical precedent here is sobering. When countries imposed widespread tariffs in the 1930s, the impact on global trade was catastrophic. Confidence collapsed, investment plummeted, and the world spiraled into depression. Economic textbooks universally warn against this kind of unilateral tariff strategy. Yet Trump seems convinced he can somehow make it work. Perhaps most ironically, Trump's approach combines two contradictory psychological elements that make for terrible policy. There's this profound self-confidence that America can bully everyone into submission, paired with an extraordinary sense of victimhood that the most powerful nation on earth is somehow being cheated by countries that can barely feed themselves. Appeals courts are reviewing Trump's authority to impose these sweeping tariffs, with Trump himself warning of another Great Depression if the courts rule against him. The constitutional and legal framework simply wasn't designed for this kind of economic warfare. The coffee industry offers a perfect microcosm of how this plays out in practice. Many US companies source their beans from Brazil, from major chains down to small local roasters. That 50% tariff isn't hurting Brazil as much as it's forcing American businesses to absorb higher costs or pass them on to consumers who are already dealing with inflation. Looking ahead, the implications are staggering. If Trump continues down this path, we could see the emergence of a genuinely multipolar economic system much faster than anyone anticipated. BRICS and other regional blocs are gaining momentum not because they are inherently anti-American, but because America is positioning itself as anti-everyone else. The ultimate irony is that Trump's trade strategy might succeed in forging new alliances, just not the kind he intended. By creating a common external threat, he is giving desperate nations powerful incentives to coordinate their responses and reduce their dependence on American markets and systems. We are witnessing the potential end of an era where the US could unilaterally reshape global trade through economic pressure. The question now isn't whether other countries will adapt to Trump demands, but whether America is prepared for a world where its economic leverage has been fundamentally diminished by its own actions. Speaking of fundamental changes in global power dynamics, if you found this analysis valuable, I would love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Trump's tariff strategy will ultimately backfire and accelerate to America's decline as the dominant global economic power? Or could this aggressive approach somehow force other nations to back to negotiating table on US terms? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis of the geopolitical forces shaping our world. When Ford had to shut down its Chicago plant last May, most people assumed it was just another supply chain hiccup. But the real story was far more alarming. Ford couldn't get the rare earth magnets needed for their SUVs because China had effectively turned off the tap. This wasn't an accident or a logistics problem. This was Beijing flexing what might be its most powerful economic weapon against the United States. China doesn't just dominate rare earth metals, they control them with surgical precision. We're talking about 90% of global processing capacity and nearly 70% of mining production. But here's what makes this truly dangerous. China has spent the last 15 years systematically transforming a chaotic industry into a centralized weapon of economic warfare. Let me explain what rare earth elements actually are, because the name is misleading. These are not the rare in traditional sense. There are 17 metallic elements with names like neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium. What makes them special isn't their scarcity, but their unique properties. They create the strongest permanent magnets known to science. They are 20 to 40% more energy efficient than ordinary motors, and they are absolutely essential for modern technology. Think about your smartphone. The speaker, the vibration motor, even the screen relies on rare earths. That Tesla in your neighbor's driveway, its motor contains powerful neodymium magnets. The wind turbines generating clean energy. Each offshore turbine needs about 4 tons of rare earth magnets. F-35 fighter jets, missile guidance systems, MRI machines, they all depend on these elements. Here's where China's strategy becomes brilliant and terrifying. In 2010, China's rare earth industry was a mess. Hundreds of independent miners and processors operated with minimal oversight. Smuggling was rampant, environmental damage was catastrophic. Beijing had the resources but lacked control. But then something remarkable happened. Over 15 years, China technically consolidated this entire industry. By 2013, they had reduced hundreds of operators to just 10 authorized producers. Today, only 2 state-owned giants control the entire sector. China Rare Earth Group dominates the southern deposits rich in heavy rare earths. China Northern Rare Earth Group controls the northern light rare earth resources. This wasn't just industry consolidation. This was strategic preparation for economic warfare. China eliminated illegal operations, implemented sophisticated tracking systems, and created production quota systems that gives Beijing complete control over global supply. The quota system is particularly clever. China issues mining quotas, smelting quotas, and separation quotas twice yearly. In 2023, they increased production by over 21%. In 2024, they deliberately slowed growth to under 6%. They are calibrating supply like conductor directing an orchestra, maintaining prices while preventing competitors from gaining ground. But China didn't stop there. They banned the export of processing technology and equipment. Even if other countries have rare earth deposits, and many do, they can't build competitive processing facilities without Chinese expertise and machinery. It's like controlling not just the oil but every refinery on the planet. April 2024 marked the moment China fully weaponized this control. Beijing imposed export restrictions on 7 critical rare earth elements and high-performance magnets. Companies worldwide suddenly needed special licenses to import these materials. The licensing process became deliberately opaque and invasive. The impact was immediate and devastating. China's rare earth sales to America dropped 37% in April. Magnet sales fell 58% to the US and 51% globally. But here's the crucial detail: only about 25% of license applications were approved. The rest faced endless bureaucratic delays or outright rejections. European auto suppliers started shutting down production lines. German automotive executives warned of complete production halts. Japanese manufacturers like Suzuki suspended car production entirely. The global auto industry, already stressed by various supply chain challenges, found itself facing a new existential threat. Ford's Chicago plant shutdown wasn't an isolated incident. It was a preview of China's power to paralyze American manufacturing at will. And the automotive sector is just the beginning. Defense contractors, renewable energy companies, electronic manufacturers, they are all vulnerable to Beijing's rare earth leverage. What makes this particularly dangerous is complete absence of alternatives. Australia's Lynas Rare Earths is literally the only producer of separated heavy rare earth products outside China. One company for the entire rest of the world. New facilities are planned in the US and Australia, but they are still under construction. Even when completed, they will represent a fraction of global demand. The International Energy Agency projects that by 2035, China's share of rare earth mining might fall from 60% to 52%. their processing dominance might drop from 91% to 77%. But even these optimistic projections leave Beijing with overwhelming control. And that's assuming everything goes perfectly with alternative development projects. The geopolitical implications are staggering. China can selectively restrict access during trade disputes. They can use rare earth access as leverage in completely unrelated international negotiations. They can influence foreign policy decisions by threatening critical supply chains. It's economic question at its most sophisticated. This isn't theoretical. In 2010, China cut rare earth exports to Japan during a territorial dispute. It was a clear warning that went largely unheeded by American policymakers. The current restrictions are not temporary trade measures. They are strategic tools designed to maintain Chinese dominance. Recent diplomatic efforts have yielded limited results. After intensive negotiations in London, China agreed to resume approving export licenses for 6 months. President Trump claimed this would provide reliable access to rare earths and magnets. But the details remain murky and the defense sector is completely excluded from any licensing agreements. Industry experts remain skeptical. The licensing process still requires companies to submit detailed production data, customer lists, facility photographs, and end-use applications. Some describe it as official information extraction. Chinese authorities are essentially mapping global technology supply chains while maintaining the right to cut them off at any moment. American manufacturers are desperately seeking alternatives. BMW has developed magnet-free electric motors for some applications, but they still need rare earths for smaller components. General Motors and other automakers are researching low rare earth motor designs, but few have achieved commercial scale production. The harsh reality is that China spent decades building this dominance while America focused elsewhere. Beijing subsidized processing, invested in global mining operations, and developed unmatched technical expertise. They moved early into Africa and Latin America, partnering with resource-rich governments and building integrated supply chains. Meanwhile, American efforts have been fragmented and inconsistent. The Obama administration won a World Trade Organization case against Chinese restrictions but assumed legal victory would prevent future manipulation. The first Trump administration identified rare earths as critical but exempted them from China tariffs. The Biden administration took a more structured approach but limited progress against permitting delays and bureaucratic obstacles. The current situation represents China's most powerful economic weapon against the United States. It's more targeted than trade tariffs, more subtle than sanctions, and more effective than military threats. China can disrupt American manufacturing, compromise national security, and influence international relations simply by controlling access to these 17 elements most Americans have never heard of. What we are witnessing isn't just supply chain management, it's economic statecraft at the highest level. China has transformed rare earth elements from commodities into instruments of geopolitical power. They have created dependencies that will take decades to unwind, if they can be unwound at all. The question isn't whether China will use this leverage, the question is how America will respond when they do. For centuries, China was world's economic center. They invented gunpowder, the compass, and paper money. Chinese expeditions reached Africa before Columbus ever set sail. This wasn't just another regional power, this was global economies beating hard. Then everything changed. The 1800s brought the Industrial Revolution to Europe and America. Steam engines, railways, factories, and most importantly, military technology that China couldn't match. When British warships came at Chinese ports with superior firepower, China had no choice but to give ground. That's how Britain got Hong Kong. What followed was what Chinese historians call the century of humiliation. Foreign powers carved up Chinese territory. The economy stagnated under outdated systems. By the time Mao Zedong took power, China had become a shadow of its former self. Mao's communist experiment made things worse. The Great Leap Forward killed up to 45 million people through famine. The Cultural Revolution destroyed what little economic progress remained.